Hello, it's Ben with the DIY Homefront, and today I'm acting as a painter. So, let's get into it. So we've got a room off of our garage that we normally have exercise equipment set up in. And it was being used by somebody for a little while, and we decided we'd refresh it. So we're gonna paint everything. I've already cleaned the walls and I've already wiped down the ceiling, at least around the crown molding. This is my preferred paint when painting the ceiling. I really like the fact that it's got a pinkish hue to it while it's still wet. It makes it a whole lot easier when you're painting the ceiling to be able to identify the areas that you have painted and have not painted. I had this door shake the can when I purchased the paint, but that's been a few days ago, so I'm going to give it a quick shake. I also like to put this nifty little cover on top of the can once I open it. It only costs a few dollars, but it makes it so much easier to pour out the paint and probably pays for itself by keeping you from wasting the paint out of the can. I'll put it on the can after I open it up, and I'll make sure that the spout faces the front of the can so that way I still can read the directions on the back of the can. You need to make sure you seat it really tight on top of the can, and you need to hold it in place the first couple of times you're pouring the paint out. The paint does weigh a pretty good bit, and you don't want it pushing this off the end. After I get as much paint off of the lid as I can, a lot of times I will go ahead and clean it. A clean paint lid is a whole lot easier to put back on the can and makes a better seal, which means your paint won't get hard when you store it for a long time. I also like keeping a wet rag handy in case I spill some paint someplace. Okay, it's time to attach this pouring device onto the can. You need to push it down firmly, and there's also a little lip here you can open up that lets air in it to help it pour out quicker. Even though I push this device on top of the can very firmly, I'm still going to hold it in such a way that it can't come off by accident. And I'm filling up this container so I can cut in around the ceiling. And if you're not sure what cutting in means, it's where the ceiling ends up hitting the wall. If you have a roller, it's very difficult to get right up to that edge. So you paint that with a paintbrush so your roller doesn't have to. I'll use a paper towel and wipe off any excess paint from around the edge of this pour spout and put the lid on it. The last cool thing about this paint lid is that the pour spout can be pushed down. So if you wanted to store paint in a cabinet and just leave it on there as a permanent lid, you could do that too. The act of painting can be very misleading. It's so basic, you're just putting a liquid on a surface. But there is a lot of skill to it. Learning how much paint to put on your paintbrush, learning how to hold the paintbrush, how to get the paint to flow and to cut a straight line. And all those things come with time. The more you paint, generally, the better a painter you'll be. What I'm doing right now is called cutting in. And I'm painting a small strip where the roller can't get to. And since I'm going to paint the walls, I don't have to be too careful about how sharp of an edge I create. I just need to make sure I don't miss any spots, because the ceiling paint is flat and the wall paint is satin, and you'll be able to tell the difference between the sheen. Now here what I'm doing is I'm going to use this ceiling paint as a primer, and I'm going to go over all those spots on the wall that I caulked. And that'll just make it easier when I go to paint the walls. Anytime you're painting above yourself, the paint's going to want to flow down because of gravity. So occasionally I have to stop and wipe all that paint off of the brush to keep it from getting all over the handle and me. Even if you're using drop cloths, if you think you spilt some paint, you need to stop and try to make sure you clean it up. That wet washcloth will get almost anything up if you don't let it sit for too long. There's a large ceiling fan in the center of the room, and I removed the screws out of the decorative cover that went around the support hardware. This will allow me to paint the ceiling around the fan without getting any paint on the fan itself. If you're really worried about getting paint on a ceiling fan, you can go through the trouble of taking off the fan blades and then taking a trash bag and putting it over all the metal hardware of the fan. Well, we're finally to the point where we're going to use a roller and paint the ceiling. We've gone around the entire edge of the room and cut in about a 2-inch strip. And this should give us plenty of room so that we can get the roller right up to the edge without making a mess. And we got the ceiling fan in the center of the room. Now that I've got my drop cloth and a well-used paint tray, along with my paint and a damp rag, I'm going to go ahead and pour some into this tray so I can get some paint on the roller and on the ceiling. You don't have to fill the paint tray up too full because it's extremely easy to add more paint with this pour spout on this paint can. Okay, I've got a new paint roller on a paint frame in the paint tray, and now I'm going to get a paint extension pole and screw it onto the handle, and that'll make it a little bit easier for me to handle. You want to load the roller up, but you don't want any paint dripping off of it. You'll have to load this roller up with paint and roll it out on the ceiling 2 or 3 times before the roller actually is saturated with paint all the way through. You can see here how I've got multiple drop claws, and they are pushed right up to the baseboard so that way if there's any drips it won't get on the carpet. You want to take slow, steady strokes, and you don't want to push down so hard that you've got paint squishing out from the ends. You'll have to dip the roller in the paint tray quite a few times when you first start, so that way you can get some paint loaded up and on the ceiling. And then once it's there, you can start trying to work that paint across the ceiling. When you're working along the edge where the wall meets the ceiling or the wall meets the floor, you really want to take your time and try to get a nice, clean, straight line. As you work away from the edge of a corner or from where the wall meets the ceiling, you can speed up a little bit and really spread the paint out. After you do this for a while, you can really sort of get a rhythm. And the paint being just the slight hint of pink makes it a lot easier to see where you've painted and where you haven't. And as it dries, that pink will disappear and it'll dry white. Well, I went ahead and sped up the video some. That way you don't actually have to watch me in real time. That would probably be about as much fun as watching the paint dry. But it should end up taking about 4 minutes to do what took me about an hour. You'll need to constantly readjust your drop claws unless you've got something that's really pretty big. I recycled our old bedspread to use as a drop cloth. I don't really care for using plastic sheets or plastic as a drop cloth. The paint will land on the plastic and it won't soak in or dry, so you'll step on it and it'll be on the bottom of your foot or your shoe, and as you walk across the room you'll leave little footprints or paint prints on the floor as you go. If you're using something made out of fabric, most of the time it will sort of soak into it and it won't do that. Make sure you take your time if you have to paint around a ceiling fan. I know it doesn't look like I am, but if we were watching this at the normal speed, I'm going a lot slower to make sure I don't accidentally hit the fan blades and put paint on them or leave paint on any of the metal. Something else I've learned over the years as I've painted ceilings is to make sure that you've got enough paint to paint the ceiling all at one time. I can remember I was painting the ceiling in our master bedroom one year, and I thought I had enough paint to paint the whole ceiling, but I didn't. So I went to the store and got some more ceiling paint. And lo and behold, after I got some of that paint on the ceiling, it was a little bit of a different color, enough that you could notice it. And since it was in our bedroom and you lay in your bed and you look at the ceiling, I had to go back and paint the ceiling a second time so that it was all the same shade. Talk about a DIY buzz killer. Doing the same job twice will always get you frustrated. My wife and I are both looking forward to when we can use this workout room as it's intended. We'll still have the bathroom that needs to be done, but that won't keep us from being able to use the workout room area. I didn't film all of the prep work I did before I started painting the ceiling, but the kitchen area behind me has plastic over all the countertops and cabinets. And that's held up with big clips, like big paper clips the size of a clothespin. And I find it's easier just to do that than it is to try to get sheets over all the cabinets. The only downside to using that thin plastic sheet as a drop cloth is that it blows around a lot in the wind. And because of that, I would never use it outside, but the air conditioner is blowing it around a pretty good bit just inside in the kitchen area. If you find this kind of DIY project interesting, I've got a bunch more in this series. I've got the walls to paint, I've got an air conditioner to install, I've got some furniture to build, and we have to clean the carpets. And then we're going to move on to the bathroom. And a lot of the fixtures in the bathroom are corroded, so we're going to put in a new light fixture, a new sink, and some new shower plumbing. Might want to consider subscribing to make sure you catch all that interior DIY content. This lamp that hangs out over the kitchen table is in an awkward position and the wrong height, so having my wife around to help hold it out of the way really is helpful. And here's one more random thought for you. I like to paint barefoot, and the reason why I do is if I drop some paint on the floor and I step on it barefoot, I usually can tell, and that's going to keep me from walking all over the place and tracking paint. If you're wearing shoes and you step on a blob of paint, you're not going to know it, and you're going to track it across the room. And we're done painting the ceiling, so it's time for cleanup, and I have to show this. I used this type of paint scraper as a tool for years and never realized that the curved part on it was designed to fit over a roller and help get all the paint out. And you just don't realize how much paint's left in the roller till you do this. And I want to say this paint was $40 a gallon. So getting all the paint out of the roller and putting it back in the can for next time really saves a lot of money, as opposed to having all that paint in the roller and either throwing it away or just wasting it because you clean the roller. And after you get all the paint out of the roller, it's pretty easy to clean up. You can just take it outside with a garden hose and repeatedly spray it down with the hose. Well, that's how you paint a ceiling, or at least that's the way I paint a ceiling. That's where you come in, and we've got a great ceiling all the way through, even into the kitchen area. Well, I guess you got to see how some of the other projects in this room turned out too. But we'll get to those. So like, subscribe, and check out my videos, and I'll see you in the next one.